2020 marked the beginning of an unforeseen period of history. Panicked and confused, the entire world quickly shut down as news of the inexplicable COVID-19 virus spread. It rapidly changed everything, from economics to education to everyday encounters, and not a single person was left unaffected. Not you, or me, or Mac DeMarco, who after months of quarantine and the recent passing of his father, was left feeling unmotivated and lonely in his LA home. After many failed attempts to force a record, the dubbed Prince of Indie, known for his groovy tunes, crazy stage antics, and often heartfelt lyrics, was far gone, and urgently sought a breath of fresh air. So when Los Angeles finally loosened their COVID restrictions, Mac manically packed his 1990s Toyota Land Cruiser with a few daily essentials and some recording equipment and hit the road. With no specific plan or destination, the trip unintentionally turned into a solo, 4-month-long multinational journey, where along the way, he relished in the freedom, unraveled many personal emotions, and inadvertently created what we now know as 5 Easy Hot Dogs. Although there aren't too many details of the trip available, in today's video, I'll be attempting to tell the story of 5 Easy Hot Dogs. On the surface, the album is a 34-minute, 14-track instrumental whose gentle sounds almost blend together and create a passive, easy listen. It can very well be described as background music for many. However, when inspecting a little deeper, it is clear that the record implores much more significance than that, at least to Mac. As Mac DeMarco stated in an interview with Dazed, "This record sounds the most like me that I've ever been able to put across. It's the real essence of the music that I grew up with, or what really resonates inside me. It just kinda oozed out." The record's title, 5 Easy Hot Dogs, was inspired by the 1970s American film 5 Easy Pieces, which tells the story of Robert, a man who, after being raised in a high-class family and well-trained in classical music, abandons his past and ultimately drifts through different identities, relationships, and locations in an attempt to discover himself. Yet in the end, despite trying to reconnect with his dying father and his past, Robert is unable to find the meaning he seeks and continues wandering. It's likely that Mac felt a connection to the film as he shared a few similarities to the main character Robert, including musical talent, nomadic tendencies, and a complicated father-son relationship. The title of each track on the record details the location of where it was recorded, which gives us a general idea of the route that Mac took on his trip. With only a single goal of recording something each day, the journey drew Mac all along the eastern and western outskirts of the United States and southern Canada, covering over 6,000 miles. Mac's adventure began out of LA, when he hopped onto the interstate and drove northwest. With no clear target, he drove until he felt drowsy, which after a few hours brought him to Gualala, California, a small coastal town with a population of around 2,000 people. Here, he stayed at one of the only 2 hotels in town, the Seacliff Motel. With a view overlooking the North Pacific Ocean, he recorded the album's first 2 tracks, Gualala 1 and 2. Next, he traveled an hour away to Crescent City, California, where he stayed at North Coast Inn, a 2-star family-owned and operated hotel. Here, after tinkering with the acoustics of the room, he recorded the album's 3rd track. No matter where he worked, Mac enjoyed the unpredictability of each new room's sound and the uniquely unreplicable real sounds of the space. It's like, well, now I'm in a very strange little motel in Crescent City, California, and I wonder how the drums are going to sound in here, and I get a kick out of that, be it good or bad. It sounds like that hotel room in Crescent City, and I think that's important, he stated in an interview with Flood. After traveling through California, Mac made his way up to Oregon, where he stopped in the state's largest and quirkiest city, Portland. Staying near Hawthorne District, a spot known for its bohemian atmosphere, he recorded the album's 4th and 5th tracks. With a limited amount of equipment and space, Mac would sometimes have to get inventive to get the results he wanted. At times, that meant transforming an empty pill bottle, the body of his guitar, and gravity into a DIY drum set. Once Mac departed from Portland, he continued north and crossed the Salish Sea into his native land of Canada. while staying in Victoria, the capital of the British Columbia province, he recorded the album's sixth track before heading 3 hours away to the diverse city of Vancouver. Although he made sure to dedicate time to record, Mac spent much of his time exploring each of the places he visited. It was an entirely new experience for him, as he had never taken a true vacation. He's done a lot of traveling on tours, but due to their often strict scheduling, his timing and activities were typically restricted. So on this trip, Mac didn't hesitate to spend the day hanging out with fans or newly acquired friends. If someone recognized him and invited him anywhere, he'd likely tag along. On days where no one approached him, he admitted he felt lonely wandering solo through the unfamiliar cities. However, those opportunities led to many random experiences, such as napping beside a lake, hiking, recording videos, or eating a savory meal. After a stay in Vancouver, he made the lengthy 700-mile venture to his childhood home in Edmonton, Alberta. Throughout his travels, Mac would rely on music to keep him entertained on the road. Yet, he only stuck to a small selection of sounds, including a little Frank Sinatra, the Final Fantasy soundtrack, and a lot of Had to Fall in Love by the Moody Blues. He cycled through those records repeatedly. Throughout his 4 months on the road, he reportedly listened to the Moody Blues song over 600 times. His time in Edmonton was spent tackling personal endeavors. He visited his family, his childhood home, and unpacked many personal emotions. And once he felt ready, he continued onward, driving southeast back into the States towards Chicago. However, he wasn't able to make the drive in one go, as on the way there, he encountered a brash snowstorm. I've driven through a lot of really horrible whiteouts, but that one was one of the worst ones ever. It was just me in the middle of nowhere in a really sketchy blizzard. Semi-trucks on the sides of the road everywhere, flipped over. It was terrifying, Mac stated in an interview with Variety. Despite the brief halt, Mac made it into Chicago, where he recorded 2 tracks that made the album in the eclectic neighborhood of Wicker Park. By this point in his journey, Mac was still unsure about when he'd return home, and the idea of traversing the entire globe and making music for years lingered in his mind. Following Chicago, he went to Rockaway, New York, where he'd eventually record the album's final track before heading west towards Utah. Along the way, in Pennsylvania, he decided to quit smoking. He had given up alcohol 3 years prior, but up until that point continued to indulge in his nicotine obsession. At first, things didn't seem too out of the ordinary, and the drive was going well. Yet, before he could reach Utah, things started to take a turn for the worst. The withdrawals began to kick in and really affect him. He found it hard to interact with people, even for simple situations such as ordering food. A stutter began to seep into his speech, and dizzy, sweat-filled days became the norm. In spite of his condition, Mac still found his way to Utah. When he couldn't find a long-term rental, he settled to stay at a ski lodge in Panguitch, a town he described as empty and secluded with no one around for at least 100 miles. With the ominous winter weather looming above and taxidermy watching him off every inch of the wall, the already troubled Mac felt uneasy. He compared his experience in the space to the infamous Stephen King-inspired horror film, The Shining, which is somewhat ironic, as he detailed it was a movie that he had watched repeatedly on the trip to fall asleep. Mac only lasted 1 night in the place before checking out in order to preserve the little bit of sanity he had left. After that nightmare of a stay, Mac realized that, unlike many artists, he really did not enjoy recording in rural areas and much rather preferred urban environments. He decided to make his way back home to California, where he stopped by Coachella to recoup. Being back in his Cali crib, Mac continued to live on his own terms. He felt he was at a comfortable point in his life and was not any bit concerned with climbing up any ladder. Recording whenever he pleased, Mac ignored the concerns of his label to make and release chart toppers. It wasn't until a full year after his long road trip that he realized he had a record. In an interview with Days, he said, "I didn't think I was going to show anybody because who cares? I remember sending it to my label and they were like, what's this? I hadn't put out a record in a long time, you know, so I think they were hoping like, can't you make another record about a family member dying or something? I think the album is a bit hard to ingest." But the industry success of the album did not worry Mac at all. People can just take the music as they want to, and that's that, he stated in the same interview. So Mac took 14 tracks out of the many from his road trip and created 5 Easy Hot Dogs. The cover of the album is a sewer outlet that is across the road from a shark fin rock in Fort Bragg, The picture was taken in the early days of his trip, and according to Mac, perfectly symbolizes the genesis of his entire lonely venture. After being teased in early January of this year, the album was finally released on January 20th to mixed reviews. Some embraced the new raw sounds, while others criticized and opposed it. Yet neither opinion really mattered to Mac, who is totally content and focused on enjoying the process. Making this record felt quite natural for me. It has its own weird little music identity, and it doesn't slap, it doesn't have bangers, it just is what it is. I love music. I love recording music. I love listening to music, and I don't need extra baggage to come with it. It's a very simple pleasure of being alive. In my opinion, despite what the numbers must say, 5 Easy Hot Dogs is a wonderful album. Although it's different from records that garnered Mac his fame, it demonstrates his growth and evolution as an artist. It's also a pure expression of that period of Mac's life. He was and continues to be a free artist creating out of love and passion for music, and I'm very eager to see what he does next.
That's a wrap, motherfucker!